It's Monday here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, and today we go over my initial top 100 prospects to watch here in the NFL draft process. We'll go over what to expect at the combine, who makes out that top 100, and this week's Mock Draft Monday winner, all here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things on the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find this show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day because we're your team every day. And a reminder, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Use your profit boost on an NBA future bet, and you can get entered for your chance to win a trip to the NBA Finals. Play your game with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, Steelers fans, it's Combine Week. I will be in Indianapolis all week. We'll get to talk to Omar Khan. We'll talk more about him tomorrow, but we'll also get to talk to a ton of NFL draft prospects. Approximately 319 players have been invited to the Combine. We'll be able to talk to them, interview them. We'll go through some of those interviews on this show, both during this week and in the weeks coming after. We'll also get to watch them perform on the on-field drills to see who they are, just how fast they are, get their actual size measurements, confirm and deny a lot of different things that we have been looking at these guys for quite some time for. But as you guys know, I grind a lot of tape. I watch a lot of football tape, especially in the college football level, trying to understand some of these prospects. My primary focus so far as tape watching has been on wide receivers, cornerbacks, and quarterbacks. But I have dabbled in other areas. But I've been able to construct my top 10 receivers, top 10 cornerbacks, and now I have my top 100 players to look at so far in this draft class. Now, again, this is just my precursor review of a lot of different positions based off of notes that I put together about players that I've watched and I've looked at. Some I haven't had much time to look too much of their tape. So others I've kind of looked extensively at and kind of gotten a good feel of who they are. But all this also is going to be able to be changed or to be noted to be changed later throughout this draft process as we see them test at the combine, as we talk to them, get a better sense of who they are, see what the feedback is, and then also see where things play out when we get to study more tape on the other prospects here. So without further ado, let's get started on our top 100 board here that we have to start the year. Remember, this is subject to change throughout the years going on. I apologize for not a pretty view for our YouTube viewers. This is what I was able to kind of put together for you. If you want to read a comprehensive view of this will be on the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette's website, post-gazette.com, where you can kind of go through it and read through my reasoning for some of the prospects here. But as you guys can imagine, the number one prospect is Fernando Mendoza. And after that, my number two is Caleb Downs, the Ohio State safety. He just is that dynamic at the safety position that I think he is literally the second best overall player in this draft class. Some people say it's Arvell Reese. Some people say it's Ruben Bain Jr. Some people say it's Jeremiah Love. But to me, it's about Caleb Downs in that spot. Now, here's the thing: is when you go through that list, and again, you can read through it at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. But a breakdown of that list, when I put together my top 100 and I went back and confirmed where the emphasis was, I look back, 16 of my top 100 players were wide receivers, 16 of them were edge rushers, 14 of them were cornerbacks. So what's this saying? There's a lot of players in those playmaking positions that are high up in my top 100 board and are showing that this could be, those are the strengths of this draft class. Now, there were also 10 defensive tackles and 10 safeties in this draft class, and I think that in my top 100. So that's something to keep an eye on as well. But when I look at how this board has been assembled, I kind of look again back at the guys that are at the top of this draft class, and how in that first 12 picks you're going to see the safety Caleb Downs there, 3 wide receivers, the top 3 guys I've been talking about. Carnell Tate, still my top number 1 wide receiver. I have him as 8th overall on my big board. Makai Lemon at 9 and Jordan Tyson at 10. above them, though, I have Sonny Styles, the linebacker of Ohio State. I still haven't done my deep dive on Sonny Styles, but even in the short dive, I'm just extremely impressed with his athleticism at the position, and think he could be a guy that lights it up for the Steelers if they were to trade up and get him and make him their new inside linebacker. But again, right after those wide receivers are the top cornerbacks, Mansoor, Delane, and McCoy. And I got to say, if McCoy did not suffer an injury that knocked him out for the entire season, and he played, if he showed an improvement from where he was in 2024, I'd have him as my number one cornerback because I was just that impressed by them. But both of those guys look like guys who could play play aggressively and shut down wide receivers across from them. I also really liked some of these defensive tackles in this class: Caden McDonald, Peter Woods, but Denzel Boston, that fourth wide receiver, I have him at 16th on my big board here. If you're wondering who my 21st player is, because that's where the Steelers would pick, it's tight end Kenyon Sadiq out of Oregon. Just what I briefly read up on him, I think he's solid. I don't think the Steelers are picking him. This is not how I think the draft order will go down. For those who don't know how big boards work, this is more so about where I personally rank these players when I stack them up against each other, just so you can kind of build a priority list for yourself. Now, looking at this list, if I was to look at my top 32 players of this list, when I look at the players that I listed here, because I listed if you're watching on YouTube, I'm putting up a visual of the top 32 players and where I have them ranked. Of this list, you can kind of see the early wide receivers, 4 wide receivers in this list from Tate, Lemon, and Tyson in Boston, to be expected from them. But then also at the 5th, that is, you keep going down, is Chris Brazzell, the wide receiver out of Tennessee. Now, I did my top 10 wide receivers list fully last week, so we'll be going over them. And again, all this is subject to change. But also look at the other positions that are really strong in this draft class. We note defensive tackle with Caden McDonald and Peter Woods there, but also note when you get into the mid-20s, you get Lee Hunter out of Texas Tech, Caleb Banks out of Florida, and Kristen Miller out of Georgia. Really strong class there. I'll also note this looks like a decent offensive tackle class. I don't think the Steelers are going to go that direction. I think they're going to give more time for Broderick Jones and Troy Fautanu to develop as a duo. But Francis Maioga of Miami, Spencer Fano of Utah, my 2 top guys, but also looking at Caden Proctor out of Alabama, Monroe Freeling in the later part of the first round. But here's the thing. We go over this every year. When you have a position group that you're really targeting, like I think the Steelers really should be targeting wide receiver, cornerback, safety as some of their priorities. When there's other strong position groups as well, those are the picks that you hope fly off the board so that your players fall down to you. And so if you're looking at this right now and the way things are playing out, you kind of want edge rusher to fly off the board and offensive tackle to fly off the board, because if they do, you can get closer and closer so that maybe you only have to trade up to 15, 16, or 17 to get a Makai Lemon or a Mansoor Delane or a Jermod McCoy, or you can trade up to 12 or 13 if Caleb Downs falls that far, because hey, safety position isn't valued as much as it used to be back in the day. Though some would argue that that's starting to change with the flexible position value of a safety when you start looking at guys like how Nick Emanwari played for the Seahawks. But in this top 100 draft class, there's plenty of space for the Steelers, I think, to get a serious playmaker at several different key positions of need: wide receiver, corner, defensive tackle, all 3 there. And if they do decide to trade away one of their top edge rushers, like we explored them, the possibility of them doing last week, I don't think they should, and I don't think they will. This would be a good class to go back and reload with a young defensive edge rusher who could be a premier player and part of that rotation for years to come. But still, again, there's lots of opportunities for Omar Khan to get aggressive in this draft class. We'll dive more into this top 100 list as in this next segment here, because I want to look more from 33 on through 100 to show you guys just how full of different options, because when we go 1 through 32, those are the guys that I think are bona fide. Like, hey, you get this guy in the first round, you're standing a good chance to develop them into a star player. But when you start getting to those other rounds, it's not as bona fide of a high level pick, but those are the guys that could become those plus starters for you, kind of like how Alex Highsmith has for the Steelers. And there's plenty of those guys at those key positions I'm talking about the Steelers should be targeting. We'll discuss that next here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, I want to remind you that this show is also brought to you by TurboTax. Tax season doesn't have to take over your life this year. TurboTax is making it easier than ever to just hand things off and move on with your day. With TurboTax full service, you can have your taxes done for you by a trusted local expert start to finish without the stress or the guesswork. Instead of spending hours trying to figure out forms, you can meet with the local TurboTax expert in person or connect online. They handle everything from W-2s to self-employed forms and work to get you every deduction. You can upload your documents, go about your day, and you get updates right in the TurboTax app. It's a huge time saver and gives real peace of mind knowing an expert is handling it. For a limited time, you can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150 all in if a TurboTax expert didn't file for you last year. Just file by February 28th. Take taxes off your plate and get back to your life. Visit TurboTax.com/local to book your appointment today. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, Chris Carter here, breaking things down as we continue the show. Let's keep this show rolling with my top 100 list. Again, you could read this in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I'll have my top 100, I believe, up by this morning if you're reading this, or if you're listening to this or watching this on Monday. But as we said, with the top 32, and even with the top 50, when I went into that, the top 50 is still very heavy corner and wide receiver. And that's not me saying that because I think the Steelers need it. This is like me actually looking and thinking, this is who I think are the best in these spots. And that's where I think it's still special for the Steelers to try to get aggressive in these positions. When I looked at the top 50 picks that I projected, or the top 50 prospects that I ranked, it was still 9 wide receivers, 9 edge rushers, 8 cornerbacks, 7 safeties, 5 defensive tackles. Like these are all positions I think the Steelers could attack. Edge rusher maybe less so, but this is where I think they could really get strong. Now let's go through 33 through 64. If you're watching for cornerbacks and wide receivers, right outside of that top 32 range is where I start to place some of those names that we've talked about. Makai Fields, wide receiver out of Notre Dame, is my 34th ranked prospect in this draft class right now. If he blows up this combine with some great testing, he's going to shoot up inside that top 32 and maybe inside the top 30 itself, and make him a guy that I do think goes in the first round. He just his hand skills, or his ball skills, just seem so that impressive. If he's able to put on for people at the combine, he's going to impress a lot of people. I also think he's going to interview well when people talk to him. But another guy that I have higher up than most is Colton Hood, cornerback out of Tennessee. Now, some people have Colton Hood further down as sort of a middle second round pick. A lot of people think the Steelers could probably get him in the 53rd overall. I don't think he's going to last that long. I think Colton Hood's one of the more well-rounded cornerback prospects who can play man in this draft class, and I think he's going to probably go in the first round. I think people are going to look at him and along with his cornerback rush and go there. I may even rank him higher than he is at 35th right now if he runs really well in the combine. I really liked him when I saw him at the Senior Bowl. I thought he really put on there. I studied his tape. I did a really good deep dive on my top 12 to 14 cornerbacks in this draft class, and I particularly liked Colton Hood. Now, for some of the players, if you're wondering, because I haven't really gotten a chance to go over my top 10 or so cornerbacks, Colton Hood would be my 4th best cornerback on my big board right now. Though I do think there's a chance he could pass Avion Terrell of Clemson. A lot of people really like Terrell because he's a good athlete. He has positional flexibility. He can play the ball well. But I prefer Colton Hood because I think he's better physically, and I think he's a better tackler. I think he can also handle bigger receivers better than Avion Terrell can. But I think Terrell might test better, and that might really help him in the long run. Still, look out for Colton Hood to make it 2 Tennessee cornerbacks along with Jermod McCoy to get picked in this early round. Now, as we continue going through the list here, after him are a couple slot corners that I really like. Keontae Scott out of Miami or D'Angelo Pons out of Indiana. both of those guys I have ranging in the top 50. I rank Keontae Scott 39th overall, D'Angelo Pons 45th overall. I think both are really good talents. I just rank Keontae Scott above D'Angelo Pons, partially because he can be more physical at 6 foot, whereas Pons is 5'9" with shorter arms. I think that he's going to be feisty and dangerous in the NFL, but Scott can be feisty and dangerous and have the size. I saw that man take on offensive linemen at the point of attack and help against the run. So that's why I have Keontae Scott higher there. If you're one of those people wondering where Ty Simpson, the quarterback, is in all this, 41st. I have him. I don't even have him in the first guys picked in the second round. I have him kind of in that second tier. I think he could. I mean, this is not saying he can't go in the first round, because he very well might, because quarterback is that position that everyone wants to take a shot at. I legitimately do not believe he is worth a first round pick to the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think that, if I'm wrong and he turns out to be the franchise guy, more power to him. But I just haven't seen it in 15 starts for Alabama. I think he should have went back, got more time, and played longer. But but I think if you're weighing options, he would be a guy that if he's around in the second round, okay, then I think you're getting good value for that. But I just think there's too many players better than him as a football player in this draft class. And honestly, 41 might even be generous on my part there doing that. Now, other corners and wide receivers above him, Omar Cooper Jr., really liked him. I talked about him in the top 10 wide receiver prospects list. But if you want to look at cornerbacks, a couple guys that I think that some people are bigger on than me is Chris Johnson out of San Diego State. I've seen a lot of people list him as like the 4th or 5th best cornerback in this draft class. I just don't see that. I look at his production. Look, his ball production is really good. He got a lot of turnovers in college, and he got to the ball a decent bit, but he played at San Diego State, and he really didn't get to put on too much against top wide receiver and quarterback duos and higher level competition, like teams that went in the Big Ten or the SEC or the ACC, against those top guys and those bigger name offensive threats. And when I got to see him at the Senior Bowl, I just wasn't impressed. And so Chris Johnson did make my top 50, but barely. He was at 46th overall. And so that's where I had him there. But he's also my 7th cornerback on the list. Right after him is Devin Moore, the cornerback out of Florida. I really like Devin Moore. I think that he at 6'3", he is that prototype long-armed cornerback that I think the Steelers want to kind of have. He can play press. He can back off and play deep zone. He shows good ball skills. I think he might need to show more of being able to mirror wide receivers, because I didn't see a ton of that in his tape. There were times he did it. It's not saying that he didn't, but I didn't see it at a consistent basis like you saw guys like Colton Hood and McCoy and other guys like that towards the upper part. Another guy that a lot of people are high on that I just haven't seen it yet. I looked through a lot of tape on him, but I just didn't see a whole lot that flashed to me. But Brandon Cease, I think that's how you pronounce his name, but the South Carolina cornerback, PFF has him as like the 32nd best profile prospect overall in this draft class. I don't see that. He's my 9th best cornerback in this draft class, and I have him as my 72nd best cornerback in the best overall player in this draft class. He has positional flexibility. He can play outside corner. He can play slide. He can drop back and help as a sort of safety, and that's nice. But too many times I just saw him getting beat or just not being a contributor. And the times that he was making plays, I wasn't too knocked back by it. Just like, whoa, got to get that guy. And I felt similarly about Keith Abney II. I think here's the thing: if both these guys test really well, they both are like 6 foot in that range. They both can be those type of cornerbacks that can shoot their way up the boards. But when I was doing my look through and studying tape on these guys, I was more impressed with a lot of the other cornerbacks in this draft class that I got a closer look at. That's why I look at Devin Moore a lot more positively, Keontae Scott, Colton Hood. I think those guys deserve to be further up the list. But again, here's the cool thing about this top 100 list. There's so many different directions you can go. I have Ted Hurst as another one of my receivers. He's my 14th best receiver at 74th overall. And again, when you look at the overall breakdown of this of the position composition of my top 100, it screams this is the year to go finally get your playmakers. 16 wide receivers out of my top 100, 16 edge rushers, 14 cornerbacks, 10 safeties. And yes, there's also 10 defensive tackles, which I think they still should take a crack at. But that's why I think that there could be that could be the space to do it. And if you go back and you look at my top 100 and the back end of it, you could still see some wide receivers flying off there, a couple of defensive tackles from 90 to 100. Grayson Halton, who I spoke with at the Senior Bowl, was really impressed by his work, both as a shorter run stuffer and a pass rusher. Tim Keenan III, another guy I spoke with at the Senior Bowl out of Alabama. Both of those guys are fitting there, but right in the middle to going back, there's some guys that if the Steelers wait until the second round and they make that the space that they go after a defensive tackle, I really like Darrell Jackson out of Florida State. I think Dante Corleone's another defensive tackle that could be worth a shot. Dominique Orange of Iowa State. But there's options for the Steelers to explore on the interior defensive line if they want to try to find that either a big run stuffing presence or a guy that can help in the interior pass rush. Either would be very valuable to this team as it continues to build out moving forward. Going back to the bottom end of the list, if you're wondering about safety, again, Caleb Downs was my top guy at 30 at the second overall. But if you go through the rest of the top 100, 32 is when the next one comes out at Emmanuel McNeil-Warren, the safety out of Toledo. After him, you get down to Dylan Thieneman out of Oregon. And then there's some space next to AJ Halsey out of LSU. And then eventually you get to Bud Clark out of TCU, the guy that I said I thought really lit it up at the Senior Bowl. His flexibility and ball skills were truly impressive. I think if the Steelers can land one of those guys, they can get a guy that's going to be a long-term contributor at the safety position and help solve a position that was truly a liability for this defense last year. That position, and maybe I've talked about double dipping at wide receiver. Maybe they should be double dipping at safety because, again, I really liked some of the safety class in the top 100. I named Bud Clark. He was the last guy from 1 to 64. But right outside of that, Zakee Wheatley is at 65, the safety out of Penn State. So he's another safety that you could be looking at there. Genesis Smith out of Arizona, he's another safety. He sits at 85. VJ Payne, who also was at the Senior Bowl, and I kind of liked a lot of things that he did. He's my 92nd overall prospect. So there's some options there, and there's still some other guys that I think could fight their way into this top 100 list. Again, this is nowhere near final. This is very much a working list that we're going to continue to adapt as we get to study more of these players, see more of their measurables, see more of their testing, all that there. But the bottom line is this draft, and with the Steelers having right now projected with their 99th overall pick, which is supposed to be the compensatory pick that they're going to get for Dan Moore Jr., they have 5 picks inside the top 100. So if you could spread out those 5 picks inside the top 100, what position would you want to double dip in? What positions would you double dip in? 2 positions? Would you spread it around to 5 different positions? Let me know in the comments what you think there, because I think there's going to be some key strategies here. I also think there's a potential you spend some of those picks to move up and get a higher first round pick, a second first round pick. Lots of flexibility, I think, available to the Steelers here with this draft class. Daniel Jeremiah, known NFL draft expert, was talking last over the weekend, and he said that he even thinks that the day 2 is the better value of this draft class. So maybe it's not even about trading up, for day 1 picks. Maybe it's about maximizing those day 2 picks. And right now they have 4 at 53rd overall, 76th overall, 85th overall, and 99th overall. So 3/3 and a second. Maybe it is about trading back and getting an extra pick on day 2 to do that. So this is I think this is a heck of a top 100 group. We'll continue to adapt to it as we go throughout the process of the NFL draft off season. That includes being at this combine all week long, where we get to talk to players and evaluate them and then watch how they perform. But then also when we go through the pro day process and we get to see what guys did or didn't perform at the combine, how do they look in the updated drills there? And then of course, when we get closer to the NFL draft, a final look that we'll have for you there. So still a long ways to go, but these are my top 100. If you want to read the full top 100 list and see a comparison of where I see player to player, go check out my workout at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette by going to post-gazette.com playmaker.com. My top 10 wide receivers list should be out. I believe my top 10 cornerbacks list should be out either today or tomorrow. But either way, you'll have a lot of that soon if you go subscribe to the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette and get more of my work there. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, it's time to reveal this week's Mock Draft Monday winner. For all those hundreds of submissions I had to go through. Thank you for all of that. But we'll get to who won Mock Draft Monday this week and reveal those picks next on the Locked On Steelers podcast. But first, I remind you this show is brought to you by FanDuel. If you've ever wanted to experience the NBA Finals live and in person, FanDuel is giving you the chance to turn that dream into a reality with their NBA sweepstakes. Here's how it works. You use your profit boost on any NBA future pick, and you'll automatically be entered to have a shot to win an NBA Finals trip for two. That's right, flights, tickets, the whole experience. If you're already looking at the board and thinking about which team can make a deep run, this is the perfect time to lock it in. I love futures this time of year, and whether it's picking a team to win the championship or grab a conference title, it adds that extra layer of excitement to every game down the stretch. And now, not only can you pick cash, but it can also send you to the finals. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Use your profit boost on an NBA future bet and get entered for your chance to win a trip to the NBA Finals. Play your game with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. We're back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter here, breaking things down. It's time. We've been going over my top 100. It's time to get to our Mock Draft Monday winner of this week. Every week around Friday, I post on my social media accounts at Carter Critiques about the Mock Draft Monday submissions. So many of you guys submit screenshots of your draft picks to go over it. We always try to include a rule to give people a challenge with it, so it's not just you're just picking randomly or picking all these guys. This week the challenge was to make your first pick in this draft class a defensive player and then build it out from that. So you didn't have to go all defense. You didn't have to take 3 straight defensive players or make any specific trades. You just had to get a defensive player and then build it out. So without further ado, let's congratulate this week's winner. And that was Jason Weller from the Locked On Steelers Facebook group. Shout out Jason. He went in with this pick and actually traded back in the first round and got something a little bit different here, because his first pick was Lee Hunter, Texas Tech defensive tackle. We've talked about him. He looked really good in the Senior Bowl practices. But when he traded back with the Broncos from 21st to 30, he didn't get an extra pick this year. Instead, he got a second-round pick in 2027, which I actually think is a really good thing for the Steelers to get, because if next year is the year to go, that quarterback class is going to be in the conversation, you're going to want to try to maximize your opportunities to get picks in that draft class, and you're probably not going to have the compensatory picks that you had this year fall your way, because I don't see this team naturally letting go a lot of players or cutting a lot of players that are going to get swooped up and paid the same way that they did last year. But it wasn't just the first overall pick that really won it for me for Jason. It was his overall buildup of how he filled out the rest of his picks, because I think he addressed several key needs for the Steelers, especially around that top 100 range. Him trading back in the first round got him there, but he still traded up in the second round and made sure he got one of my favorite receivers in this draft class. That was Omar Cooper Jr. out of Indiana. He got him at 35th overall by trading the Steelers' second round pick at 53rd. So natural swap of the seconds, but he only gave up the Steelers' compensatory third round pick at 99th overall to the Titans. That moved him up to 35. He took Omar Cooper. Omar Cooper, my 7th best receiver on this draft class, but it was fine because he right after that got my 6th best receiver in this draft class. That's Makai Fields with the Steelers' 76th overall pick. That's the pick that they got for George Pickens. So here would you be going in this draft class if you were to handle this the way Jason did? If the Steelers were to handle this the way Jason would, they get a defensive tackle that would, contribute to the push to try to revamp the defensive line with Keanu Benton and Derek Harmon and Y.A. Black, and then prepare you more for the day that Cam Hayward finally does retire, and then you lose an all-time Steeler that's really held up this defensive line over the years, propped them up, I think is the better way to put that. He's been spectacular. But building from there, Lee, I think Lee Hunter is a good pick there. Omar Cooper, Makai Fields. Now you've addressed wide receiver and defensive tackle. Now it's time to fill in those other spots that I think are good needs that you can get for good value in the middle parts of the draft. This is where Jason Weller went and got with the Steelers' natural third-round pick at 85th overall, Keelan Rutledge, the guard out of Georgia Tech. You guys have heard me talk about Keelan Rutledge. When I talked to him, he talked about being a mauler. He looked good during Senior Bowl week. Really impressed with him. I think if the Steelers get him in the third round, you might be able to plug him in and say, hey, day one or close to day one of his rookie season, he's going to be your left guard starter replacing Isaac Seumalo. But then right after Keelan Rutledge, he goes and gets my safety, the guy that I really like, Bud Clark out of TCU, 109th overall with that fourth-round pick the Steelers have there. He also traded up to get that pick. We traded away there's their natural fourth-round pick at 121 and a fifth-round pick at 159. And then he went and got cornerback Jalen Kilgore out of South Carolina for some depth there. And then in the sixth round, he went and got Caden Wetchen, wide receiver out of Iowa, more so as a special teamer and a return option there. So pretty awesome, pretty decent pick there to kind of build more depth into the wide receiver room, maybe some special teams help. And then he finished it out in the sixth and seventh rounds with Brian Betcher, the linebacker out of Oregon, Cole Payton, quarterback out of North Dakota State, and another edge rusher out of Wisconsin, Mason Rieger. Why not? You got one in Watt, one in Herbig. Why not take another swing at a Wisconsin edge rusher? But looking at these picks, I really like what Jason did here because he spread out the Steelers' needs and found ways to address them with I think high-end prospects. For example, Bud Clark on my top 100 list is inside the top 50 for me. Actually, let me make sure I'm not wrong in saying that. But when I look at Bud Clark, he is one of my top guys. He's just outside my top 50. He's at 58. So I think it's really good to have him there. But Keelan Rutledge, another guy in my top 100, I have him at 70th overall. So if this was the way to play out and my top 100 board held the way it looks right now, the Steelers will be getting 5 picks of my top 100 list in this draft class here, which is pretty good because they have top 5 picks in the top 100 naturally, but trading around and moving up, they got a higher value second round pick here to make sure that they got Omar Cooper and a really good receiver to pair with Makai Fields and a duo that can really work well, I think, with DK Metcalf moving forward while still getting D-line, guard, and safety all addressed here. Oh, and by the way, again, that second round pick for 2027, a really good listing here. I think if this shakes out this way for the Steelers, I think a lot of Steelers fans would be happy with this list because this would continue the rebuild that Omar Khan and Andy Weidel have undergone. But so congratulations again to Jason Weller for your Mock Draft Monday pick. Thank you to everyone who participated this week in Mock Draft Monday. But we still got a lot to talk about this week. Omar Khan talks tomorrow at the NFL Combine. We'll get you insight on what I'm expecting to hear from him. We'll talk more about what's to be expected of the biggest questions of Omar Khan, including contract questions, future questions, draft questions, all those things. So stick here with the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, wherever you get social media. My handle's always at Carter Critiques. Read my work in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette by going to post-gazette.com. Find me here on the Locked On Steelers podcast every day, Monday through Friday, on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this channel to get all of those daily episodes. Back here tomorrow with more on the Locked On Steelers podcast.